welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff that people do in marketing and how not to do crazy stupid stuff. But we're also this place, this came up recently in a question I had from an audience member about, I'm not quite sure what we're here to talk about. And we have a theme, and I'll intro that in a second. But this is very much a place for exploration, folks. There's a lot of places where you can go where they want to tell you the answer. And the fact is, I don't know you. I, in fact, have no idea who's watching this today. Could be a bunch of people, could be no people. We don't really know. And so to give advice to people we don't know, and we don't know their situation, and we don't know their industry, and we don't know their energy, and we don't know those things, it just doesn't make sense. So instead, the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show is a place to explore ideas. So the ideas are always related to marketing, the goal of which is to not do crazy, stupid marketing. But the point isn't to necessarily come away from a single episode and be like, I know exactly what to do to fix all my marketing stuff. No, this is an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing exploration. It's an ongoing conversation. It's ongoing all of the things. And so I encourage you, as part of your participation today, to open your minds and put on your feeling caps and feel what makes sense for you and what doesn't make sense for you, and tap into the stuff that does make sense and tap out of the stuff that doesn't make sense, because there's enough. Let's all be honest. There's enough stuff out in this world that none of us can understand. And if we focused on all of it, we'd be exhausted and distracted all the time. And so this is a place to just there will be a bunch of stuff we talk about today, and some of it will feel really impactful for you. And there will be some other stuff too, which might be super impactful for other people. But this is also your opportunity to practice what is resonating with you, and how might you take that information instead of all of the information and incorporate it into what you are going to try next. Okay, with that being said, I also encourage everyone who's watching to get in the conversation. While this might look like a conversation for two people visually from the video point of view, this is an opportunity for all of us to get into the conversation about our topic of the day, which is MQLs. And there's so much to talk about. There's no way we're going to cover it all in 45 minutes or an hour, or however long we go. But yeah, we could talk for hours and still not cover it all. But the point is that everyone has their own experience with MQLs, what works, what doesn't, questions, all that kind of stuff. And the more of that you can share with us as part of the conversation, the more robust the conversation can be for everyone. So there's this nifty difty comments feature. Wherever you're watching, whether that's YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, you can put your comments, you can put your questions, you can put your perspectives, you can share your insights, all of those things. And I would highly encourage you to do so. Okay, with that, I mentioned the topic of today. Are you guys excited for this? I called it the myth of the MQL, because MQL being marketing qualified lead, for those of you who are trying to avoid the jargon. And well, I'm just going to leave it for now as to why I said the myth. By the end of the episode, it will be fully revealed to you. But I actually had a really cool conversation with Jenn on her podcast that was not related to MQLs, but we touched on it. And then we were like, we need to dive into this. So this is why we are here today, to dive into that. So before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to Jenn. Jenn, can you give us a little overview of who you are, your background, and why you're so passionately, why you have such a passionate stance, let's say, about the MQLs?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I am a little afraid and very excited for this conversation. And yeah, as Tracy mentioned, we had a great chat on my podcast, Marketing Demystified, a couple of months ago, and which is where this topic kind of came up. So please go check that out and hear her brilliance there. But yeah, I'm a B2B growth marketer. I've been doing this crazy work for almost 20 years. I am the CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, a growth marketing agency where we do kind of fractional marketing team building for companies that don't have a marketing team or short on resources, and everything that we're focused on is about marketing like performance. Not just marketing for the sake of marketing. And I think that the myth of the MQL is one of the biggest offenders and biggest distractions actually in marketing. And there's for a lot of different reasons. And I don't mean to say that there's no value in the MQL, but not on its own. So I just have some very strong feelings about it, and I'm excited to dive in.
I was so excited. So when you shared this episode and you're talking about maybe my unpopular opinions about this, and I was like, oh, your unpopular opinions are super popular with me. And again, like this is one of the things I do want to encourage. I maybe want to encourage people more than usual in this episode to really just like try on the ideas, right? Like just because Tracy and Jen believe them doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right thing for you. If it feels like it's completely out to lunch, it's probably not in your realm of needing this conversation right now. And so, especially when it comes to marketing, especially for people who don't have a background in marketing, having two expert marketers have this conversation with a very specific experience of MQLs is still our experience of MQLs. And this is very important for you to take your experience at least at our level to say like my experience is at least as valid as the knowledge of what we're sharing here today. But I do want you to try it on because as Jen mentioned, a lot of people get stuck, and I love the word you said, distracted, by qualifying types of activities. So Jen, I thought it would be helpful for our audience. So we even have one of our audience members who's I'm trying to click my mouse and my mouse isn't even plugged in. Just don't even mind me, technology. Swanje is, thanks for explaining what an MQL is. A lot of people don't even really know what it is. So when we say MQL, marketing qualified lead, but Jen, what are some of the things that you've seen people count as a marketing qualified lead? And then I think that'll give people a good framework of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Well, and I think this actually touches on one of my biggest gripes with the MQL is that there is no universal definition of an MQL. It's just a universal misunderstanding. And it creates these like difficult conversations internally in businesses or with boards or with investors where everyone has a different historical experience with what an MQL is. And so we're reporting on things that are maybe misaligned. So, and I will say, actually, there's no wrong answer to how to qualify your leads. You just have to be really clear on what that definition is. So me personally, I am very conservative with my qualification of leads. I need to make sure that the people coming in fit my ideal customer profile. I need to make sure that they have expressed a level of intent and interest in learning more about my product or offering that qualifies them. And so what that is and what that isn't, it could be if I have a meeting with somebody at an event, a conference, I'm networking and we have a sit down and we have a good conversation, we want to do a follow-up. That is a qualified lead, in my opinion. Someone who downloads a white paper or, puts in their email address to get access to an infographic, not a qualified lead. Now, in your organization, it could be a qualified lead. And all you have to really do is make sure you factor that into your math for what success looks like. It just means you're going to have a lower conversion rate and for your leads and maybe a longer sales cycle if you count them as MQL earlier in the process. So maybe you have more leading indicators. Great, good for you. But let's make sure we're not comparing. This is where the problem comes in. Without that universal definition, everyone's looking for a benchmark. And even across our client base, we have some clients who we're generating 200-300 MQLs per month. because they have a different definition of MQL than another client who only needs 15 or 18 qualified leads a month. They convert at a much higher rate. We're qualifying them based on their ideal customer. Some companies will say, if you put in a Gmail address, we're talking B2B here, right? If you put in a Gmail address, it's not a qualified lead. Other companies are totally fine with that, right? It's all just information. I think where the problem comes in is it's not clearly communicated internally. So everyone sort of has a different idea of what it is. And then the focus becomes, we need a higher quantity of MQLs, which is not usually the right thing to focus on from a strategy perspective, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's talk about volume
Yes.
a bit, because I feel like in marketing, everyone's just like more, right? It's just, we'll do more posts, we'll do more of this, we'll do more of that, and that'll lead to more qualified leads. Maybe. But I think, I mean, you covered fairly clearly, like, we need to understand what the destination is here. Like, what does qualified mean? And what is our, like, some businesses are predominantly like marketing driven and there's very little sales. Some businesses are predominantly sales driven and there's very little marketing. And so how a marketing MQL can look in those scenarios is infinitely different. But if we don't know what qualified means to us, then it's very easy for us to get caught up in what's easy or what other people are doing, which is the white paper downloads or email signups or things of that nature. I remember actually even having a conversation once with this lady she was hosting a digital summit, and we had a really cool conversation. And she was like, yeah, what you do would be like so perfect for this. How many people are on your email list? And I was like, I don't know, like 38. I'm not trying to like build a big email list. That's not how I like communicate with people. And she was like, oh, sorry, I can only have speakers who have 5,000 people or more on their email list. And I was like, oh, that's curious, because like I primarily work through LinkedIn. I've got like 12,000 connections. So like, can I ask you why? Why is that? And her only answer was, because my coach said so. And I was like, that crazy stupid. That falls into the crazy stupid category there, folks. But actually the stupid category, which is by definition when someone else tells you to do it, and so you do it, but you don't know why you're doing it. You're just doing it because someone else told you to. Technically, my definition of stupid for the purposes of the crazy stupid marketing show. And so they're like, people pick up these things because someone says to do it. And they're like, yeah, that can make sense. But then also think about this as a entrepreneur or a small business, right? We only have so many resources kicking around. And now I think in order for me to have a qualified lead, I got to have a white paper, which means now I got to make a white paper. And either I have to make a white paper or I got to hire somebody to make a white paper. And then that costs me money. And then now, even if I get a lead, I'm already like starting from a negative cost point of view, or negative revenue point of view. And so like, does this make sense? And I think this is where like we have an opportunity just to like whoa there and say more of something meaningful makes sense. But before we jump to more and the volume of that, then perhaps we need to pull it back to focus on less, more meaningful things, and where we could actually say, when this happens, it is qualification. Mm-hmm. So like, Jen, because I'm guessing in the work that you do, you have a lot of those types of conversations. So what do you see comes up for clients in this, like a potential recommendation of like, maybe we have too much more now. Maybe we want to just peel that back a bit.
Yeah. I think there's just sort of a general sense, and I think it comes from internal pressures. Like I mentioned, your board or your investors or your, fellow leaders in your organization, people that maybe don't understand marketing are giving marketing a scorecard, right? Mm-hmm. It's MQLs, it's cost per lead, and that is creates a disconnect. It creates an environment where people are being incentivized or tasked to, hit a number that doesn't actually connect with selling, right? The marketers don't have to sell what they generate. And that scorecard of MQLs and cost per lead doesn't connect to the metrics that really matter for your business, which is typically about revenue growth or, pipeline building and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the first things that we're doing when we talk to somebody about, we just need more leads, is we're actually just doing the math. Let's look at your actual performance of these MQLs. What's the conversion rate? And I typically think of 3 stages. There's a million things you can track. This is, maybe my crazy, stupid marketing in general. There's 1,001 metrics you could track. There's only a few that matter. For me, it's typically MQLs or I tend to call them qualified leads. We could talk about why I hate the M in a second. But qualified leads, opportunities or deals or projects, however you kind of, call that next stage, and then customers, new customers. So qualified leads, opportunities, and customers. I want to see the conversion rate between those 3 stages. I know there's more stages in between. Those are the 3 I care about. And the time it takes to move between them. A lot of times what happens is, and then I'll do some more math, by the way, to be like, okay, based on that sales cycle and that, conversion rate, here's how many of each of these things we need to generate in order to hit our revenue goals, right? All simple math. Oftentimes we'll see, your conversion rate from MQL to opportunity is 2%. So yes, we could generate exponentially more crappy leads at a very low cost in order to help you hit that end goal. Or the lever that we pull is actually increasing the conversion rate. What can we do to generate fewer leads and more opportunities, right? So sometimes just looking at those numbers, oftentimes companies or teams are looking at them for the very first time. It's revolutionary. Like, oh my gosh. Or let's do that same math for some different channels and see which one performs that, like, way outperforms another. Maybe we need to not just invest in bringing in more qualified leads, but specifically more qualified leads from this source, because that seems to outperform all the others from a conversion rate or a sales cycle perspective. So really, I think drawing that connection between what's coming from marketing and what's actually turning into revenue is very eye-opening oftentimes, and gives us other metrics to look at, which is why I said at the beginning, the MQL on its own is totally useless. You really need to look at it in context with other metrics you care about and see if it's actually working, versus just, hey, we're just driving a huge volume of cheap and unqualified leads. It's the MUQL.
The unqualified leads. When most of them are unqualified, are we even really doing qualification?
Exactly.
And that's the interesting thing too, is that, let's just say 2% of your MQLs are converting into opportunities. That is puny.
Right.
So we can do that, but also keep in mind that we are giving 98% of these people either a bad brand experience because they're not in the market for what we have or what have you, or very least, the least bad option there is that we are creating an unmeaningful interaction for them. Mm-hmm. So we are now spending 98% of our marketing time creating unmeaningful interactions with people. And while there's no 100% here, right? We're never going to get to the point where we're creating 100% meaningful interactions with people, because that's not how marketing works. But we could get to 40%, 38%, and that would have a drastic impact on the business without generating more leads. And so I think that is also, when we get into Well, let's go here. Let's go here with AI, shall we? Because I feel like a lot of the automations that we're seeing nowadays are about the volume, right? So you know that you generate X amount of MQLs and 2% of them are qualified. So what you need is you need to generate more faster. And we've got an automation for that. There's multiple automations for that. So like, Jenn, do you have experience with your clients or with yourself in like how automation performs in those senses versus being able to look at this more holistically and say, maybe that's just actually not, it is one way, but maybe that's not the way we want to do it.
Yeah. So I think automation as a category, there's some really good opportunities for automation. I think, to the point about creating those meaningful experiences, some might be qualified, but maybe just not ready. So there has to be some kind of ongoing nurture, or like, how do you stay top of mind with those people who are qualified but not quite ready yet? I would argue they're probably not MQL yet, but there is a sort of nurture that needs to happen. So people that express some interest, maybe they do come to your webinar or they do download your white paper, they're not ready to be handed off. If you're in an organization that has a handoff between marketing and sales, right? Not everybody does, but let's say you do. They're not quite ready for a sales interaction. I hope you're not putting 98% of your sales' time into unqualified leads, but there should be a nurture. And I think that's a great application for automation. As long as you make sure the content is still human generated and useful and valuable and adding value to the people, the people's experience that are in your nurture program. I think like some of the AI based prospecting, like high volume, quote unquote, personalized outreach, it feels very mechanical. I think it often is, in a very saturated channel where people see right through it. I actually just had this conversation with somebody today about, who was frustrated with their email performance. And I said, I've been telling you this for a while, like you need to incorporate some video, because it's a great way to tell people, even if you're using some automations or sending bulk, like I'm a real human behind all of this content. There's so much automated AI generated content in the mix that anything you can do to insert a bit of humanity, I think is really beneficial and does provide that better brand experience for people. It will surface more qualified leads or better qualified leads. And it doesn't always have to be video. In this example, this conversation, we were talking about video being that method. But I think that there's a time and a place for it. And we have a lot of automations built into our processes. It should make you more efficient. It should make you more productive, but it's not necessarily the solution for like, oh, instead of sending 1,000 emails, we're going to send 10,000 emails and get, whatever, 10x the MQLs that are convert at 2%. Like it's not, that's not the way to do it either. So I think find that spot in your pipeline. Maybe you're sending more high intent based communications to a specific segment of people. Like that's where I think it's most beneficial.
Yeah. And I think like in a lot of these things you're talking about, as a marketer, I'm like, yep. I also know that there's a lot of non-marketers who watch the show. And so when we're talking about all these things and like, maybe you want to use video, maybe you don't, you could do this with email or you could do this with email. These types of things can also feel very overwhelming. And it's another reason to kind of just like peel back and say, okay, let's say I do the simple math right now. I send 100 emails, I get 2 of them back, right? Like, is that what I'm hoping it would be? Yay or nay? Maybe it is. Maybe that's all you need, right? Could be good. If it's nay, then you have the opportunity to think about, okay, well, do I want to keep converting at that rate and just send out more emails? Because there's an automation for that, right? You can also like buy lists and all this kind of stuff. And you can see by my face that I do not support that. But we can talk about that in a different episode. But the point is, and for those of you who know me, I'm all about marketing authenticity, right? Like, what would you do? Would you go out and create an unmeaningful experience for 98% of the touches you make? Or would you be like, that seems like a waste of time. Maybe I should make the touches I do make more meaningful. Also, what does that look like for me? What does that look like for my customers? There's a unique relationship there that exists that allows it to be more productive or not more productive. It's not like one thing that we can all do that would increase that percentage from 2 to 3, right? But there is something you could do to increase that percentage from 2 until 3. And if it is in this space of, again, looking at what your expectations are, or as soon as someone signed up for my email list or a qualified lead, maybe, right? We have Swatche in the comments, right? Where like, if you go to a trade show and people see your lamps and they're like, I would love this. And you're like, here, fill out this form and you can like book a call. Then yeah, that might be a qualified lead. If somebody comes in through a whole bunch of mamby-pamby lead scoring techniques that a bunch of marketers have come up with in terms of online interactions, then perhaps it's not the same. And are we considering those two things the same? Right. Maybe one is very much a qualified lead and one is not a qualified lead, which is what Jen was speaking to earlier. But again, getting into this like discovery, like dig in like an archaeologist into your MQLs and what you are assuming about them right now is a really powerful way to reveal some of these things. And then, yeah, sure, maybe you end up having a conversation about email, or maybe you end up having a conversation about video, but that's always like down the line. That's an execution phase. This is that like discovery phase. Yeah. I want to just call up, Ellen's got a great comment here about how we're starting to shift our marketing organization's mindset in a similar way, focusing less on lead volume and more on optimizing our channels to drive meaningful conversions. Although she also goes on to say, sometimes it's an uphill battle. Yeah. So Jen, what makes it an uphill battle for organizations who are like, yes, we get it logically? What is keeping it in this uphill battle category?
So I think there is like a lack of willingness to think differently about marketing. It is so ingrained as like this critical metric. And it's not just the MQL. I'm going to bring in our friend SQL, which is the other half of the problem. So
sales qualified lead.
Lead. So we have now in a lot of organizations, what their funnel looks like. It's the marketing qualified lead into the sales qualified lead. And there is a conversion rate between those two. So my whole issue with that is that if you have a marketing team and a sales team that have different definitions of what a qualified lead is, you got big problems. And it's just an indication of the misalignment that happens in organizations in that sort of handoff process between marketing and sales. And I don't think it's just marketing and sales that are the problem, right? It is the leadership. It is the overall company strategy. It is an uphill battle because maybe it's people that don't understand it or they don't have the time to think about it differently. That is such a huge like change management challenge where like, hey, we shouldn't actually be looking at marketing and sales qualified leads. Why don't we just call them qualified leads? Or in a previous company, I sort of made the adjustment from MQL to SQL to qualified leads, QLs, to accepted leads, ALs. So QL to AL. So I think there is something nice about, sales saying, hey, I've got it from here. so that it doesn't fall through the cracks. Like, but that to me feels more like a partnership, and we're in agreement on what's qualified. And it's basically marketing is saying, here it is, and sales is saying, I've got it. And I think that shift actually creates a lot more alignment between the two teams. And then from there, we can look at, how are we agreeing on that definition of a qualified lead? Maybe there's an account-based strategy. What a novel idea, right? Like, where marketing and sales are working together to bring in specific people and profiles, ideal customers. And then we can stop getting distracted by people that don't fit our ideal customer, or people that are showing intent. That could also be another episode where I can complain about intent signals
and provide advice on
and provide exploration and just food for thought and feelings about intent signals, because that's another thing that I think is just really it's a scorecard vanity metric that, hey, we can see a lot of intent for purchasing our product or service. But really it's difficult to define that in a way that actually connects to revenue. That's the goal. That's the thing that we forget about when we're focused too much on the MQL and the SQL and the definitions and the volume, like we talked about. We forget what we're actually trying to do. And I will caveat that by saying, I understand sometimes the sales cycle is very long, and we need to look earlier in the funnel at those early indicators to determine if what we're doing is working. I get that. If you're in a business that's selling enterprise software or something, and you've got a 9 or 18-month sales cycle, then you can't measure everything against revenue. But if you can then look at pipeline generation and qualified opportunities and, make some educated guesses on what's actually performing. I think that opportunity step is something that people often forget about. It's like either lead generation or revenue, but there's a couple of steps in between where you can say, here's another thing. I don't even know if we're ready to go down this path, but lead scoring versus quality scoring, like maybe that's another thing we could talk about. I'll pause there before I go any further, but.
Oh man, I mean, I have all the opinions on lead scoring, so we could definitely go there. But I think, okay, so two things I want to just potentially explore first before we go there is this role for an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur is sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Right. And so we could, and it's very common still for I've had clients who come to me and they're like, oh, I've worked so hard on this lead magnet, and then this lead magnet is going to go here and it's going to do all of this, blah, blah. And I'm like, good. It's not bad. It's not bad to have a lead magnet. It's just, is somebody, or could we actually say someone who doesn't know you, who found this on the internet somewhere and filled in their email, is that qualified? Or would you consider that qualified? Or if you're a consultant or any kind of service provider, do you need to have an introductory conversation with somebody before you can identify that something is actually qualified? Mm-hmm. Maybe, right? And as a solopreneur, I think it's really cool because we have more ability to make changes in that, right? If we're like, hey, I want someone to touch and feel my lamps. And once they've touched and felt my lamps, then they're a qualified lead, right? If they've done that and they've given me their email to add to my newsletter, then yes, I consider them qualified. Okay, because you can feel that in you, right? Yeah. When we layer in this layer of complexity where we have marketing teams and we have sales teams, and I'm not going to go back over them considering a qualified lead, different thing, right? Because that's just broken, and get aligned on that right now. But it's not necessarily as easy from a marketing perspective to make changes like that in a different department, depending on the culture of the organization and all of these different types of things. And so this is where I feel like the experience of it being an uphill battle can happen. I also think that there's always an opportunity to create that connection. So perhaps historically you and your sales organization haven't been overly connected, but who says you can't take that salesperson out for coffee and like pick their brain on, I mean, I've worked with enough. I'm an outsourced marketer myself. And so I generally work with outsourced sales leadership as well. And like so many times I have heard them say, we get stuff from marketing, but like it doesn't really matter. And I was like, for real? Because I care about it mattering to you. So can we have a conversation about that? Because I'm not saying maybe it hasn't mattered to this point, but I do care about it mattering to you. So can we have a conversation about what can make it matter? Because I'm not here for my entire team to waste their time on marketing crap that's not going to deliver anything from a sales point of view. This is not why we're here. We're all going to get fired. Right? Let's not do that.
We're all working on the same goal here.
I mean, at the end of the day, if we're not making money, someone's getting fired.
Right.
Right. And okay, but I do want to talk about this because when we talk about like marketing pass off to sales, which doesn't happen with entrepreneurs,
Sure.
So framing for that, but it kind of creates an out for marketers to like do stuff that doesn't matter, because I'm saying closing is sales job, right? Mm-hmm. So if they can't close, that's their problem. Doesn't matter how much crap I give them. They should be able to close it. Like, you're a good salesperson, right? You should be able to close anything. The best salespeople, it's like the best batters in the MLB. They don't hit they don't bat 1,000. Right. Nobody does. 0 people ever have done that.
Yeah.
I think one person had one game where they were batting 1,000, but like that's one day.
Yeah.
Of your whole career, right? It's not a thing. It doesn't happen. And while as marketers over here will be like, hey, there's no 100%, right? Like I can't get you like 100% of the people coming through as qualified leads. And I think there's good understanding around that. But then like, are we also accepting that all 2%, this is a tiny 2% now that I'm giving to sales, they're going to close 100% of that? Like that's not a thing for them either. So that's kind of an unfair expectation. And okay, I'm going to get to where I'm going with this.
I'm with you. I'm on the
point. Okay, the point I'm trying to get to is that I think a lot of marketers are afraid of sales. Mm-hmm. Right? They don't want the responsibility of closing. They don't want the responsibility of revenue. And so we create this buffer for ourselves against sales with a marketing MQL. Now, I've done what I can do to qualify this lead, and now you have to do the rest. But I mean, as we've already talked about today, there's so much more a marketer could be doing to qualify that lead before it goes through to sales. And in the digital environment that we're living in, by most estimates now, people are like 70 to 80% of their way through the buying process before they contact a salesperson. So actually, sales jobs should be very easy. Right? They're mostly bought the product by the time they contact sales, right? So the majority of that relationship building opportunity lies with marketing.
Yes.
But it cannot manifest so long as we're saying, I'm just going to have a white paper and get people downloaded and then pass them off to you. Yeah. Because I'm terrified to talk to people and build relationships. That's sales job.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like what happens is there's maybe a patience challenge that happens. And so the definition of marketing working is generating leads. So marketing is getting measured on how many people it tosses over the fence and not being measured on how many deals it helps close.
Right.
So there is incentive for marketing to toss more leads over the fence. Right. Because that indicates that marketing is working. Right. So if we could have a little bit more patience with marketing, because to your point, we've got to get them 80% of the way there and give them to sales when they're ready. And so we need to have the freedom to bring somebody in at the top of the funnel. Maybe there's an ad strategy to get awareness from new people. Maybe we're not measured on converting to MQL with like top of funnel activities, right? That's, often a big challenge with marketing execution is, we say, oh, that doesn't work, right? It's a top of funnel marketing tactic, but we're expecting bottom of funnel behavior. That's a problem, right? Like maybe we give that stuff time. We look at engagement metrics. We get people into our ecosystem. We nurture them. We teach them something. We add value. We show them why we are uniquely qualified to understand and solve their problem. That's marketing's job, is to educate the market on why your business understands and is uniquely qualified to solve the problem. That's it, right? And then we get people to go, you know what? You convinced me. I actually believe that you might be uniquely qualified to understand and solve my problem. So now I'm ready for a conversation. And that is the point where we are a qualified lead. But like I said, there's so much pressure for the only way that we know if marketing is working is if they're tossing people over the fence to sales. And then I've worked with 2 types of salespeople in my career. You have the one who doesn't say anything and doesn't do anything with the marketing leads because they go, well, those leads are shit. And I'm just sorry. I'm parental guidance note on the show. Those leads are shit. I'm just not going to pay attention to anything that marketing does because it doesn't help me. I'm going to do my own thing. That's one type of salesperson. And then the salesperson that comes and directly says, hey, whether they're the leader of the team or they're like, hey, these leads are not working. What can we do? How can we collaborate and get this engine running in a way that we're both successful? Those are my favorite salespeople to work with. And it's really hard as a marketer if you don't have somebody being direct and honest, and maybe they're complaining at the water cooler, like, do you believe all that crap marketing's doing? Right? That's not going to help anybody. But if you can get really collaborative, I love what you said about like taking salesperson out for a walk or something. I read an article years ago. It was like the headline, very clickbaity, was like the number one thing marketers need to know about their sales partner. And the article basically was like, how do they take their coffee, right? You just need to get to know them. You need to build a relationship that creates an openness where we can talk about when the leads are not working for you and figure out together what's the definition of qualified and when are they sales ready, because they're not sales ready when they just went on your website and subscribed for updates.
Right.
They really want your updates.
Salesperson costs a lot more than your email marketing platform, right? And so if we're talking about like throwing somebody into a nurture campaign, right? Like, well, I could have a very expensive salesperson nurturing that very frustratingly, which is not going to build the best relationship with the customer, or I can keep them in marketing until I've actually gotten them to the point where they're qualified. And I can look at like, what are the activities that we're doing that are moving people through the funnel? Again, not everyone is going to move into the funnel. If we're the sun, right, there's a whole bunch of things that are orbiting us at any given time. And there are some things that are going to come crashing right into us, but there's a whole bunch of things that are not. And there's a whole bunch of things that are going to keep orbiting for a very long time. This, I mean, like, to me, is shouting partner strategy, right? Like, any kind of partner strategy, which is also very commonly managed by a marketing team, is about keeping people in the orbit, right? In a meaningful orbit with enough gravity so they don't float away. Because otherwise I can create a whole bunch of marketing collateral that my partners never use. And then they just go, now they're Pluto instead of Mercury. And what could I do to make them Mercury, right? I don't want them to crash into me because they're not buying directly, but I want them to send me a whole bunch of stuff that's going to crash into me in this very small amount of time, right? I could have a Pluto sales cycle, but I could also have a Mercury sales cycle. So what would it look like for me to have a Mercury sales cycle?
Love that.
And again, I think from an entrepreneurial point of view, or if you have, even if you're like founder-led sales right now, this is still the case, right? Is that like you as a person are bringing those people into your orbit. Some crash in, some stay orbiting. But the point is that like we're creating enough gravity to keep people in the conversation. And this is marketing's job. I've now decided it's marketing's job to create gravity.
Love that. I love that. It's so true because, I think it's something like 90% of the people that you're talking to at any given moment are not in the market to buy anything.
Right.
And that doesn't make them not interested. That doesn't mean you don't want to keep them engaged and keep that gravitational pull. You don't have to get them all the way in. You just have to keep them close and stay top of mind. So when they are in the market to buy, which eventually they will be, they think of you first.
Right.
And that you've added something to, you've added value. You've not just sold to them. That's what happens if you throw something over to a sales team, or even if you're a solopreneur and you're doing your own sales, if your approach is constantly selling,
Right.
then people get sick of that. It doesn't actually, like, my biggest pet peeve because I get a lot of sales outreach on LinkedIn and on email and stuff, is, just checking to see if you got my last email.
Just bumping this up to the top of your inbox.
Yeah, no thanks. Like,
hey, I didn't answer that for a reason.
Exactly. But if they send me something that says, hey, I thought you might find this interesting. It's an article that I wrote about this thing, and it gives you tips on doing X, Y, and Z. Well, maybe I'll read that, and maybe I'll learn something. And oh my gosh, you just helped me. You just made my day better, or my week better, or my business better without me spending any money with you. And guess what? When I've got budget to buy the thing that you're selling, because you've already added value for me, then I'm going to go back. And if you are keeping me in your orbit, you're generating that gravity for me and keeping me close, then I'm not going to have to try to remember your name, or who was that person that sent me that thing that I thought was useful, right? Like, stay in the top of my inbox, but add value. And I think that is marketing's job, because, we're just not in the market to buy something all the time, especially in B2B. In B2C, we're always in the market to buy. We've always got
there's different problems associated with that.
Totally different problems. But in B2B, I'm spending somebody else's money, and I don't always have the time or the need for what you're selling. So, what can you do to keep me close until I'm ready?
Right. Well, this is the thing I tell people, I don't think people are out there just being like, I need authentic marketing.
No.
That's not a thing. Nobody Googled that. Right? But that doesn't mean that there's not people who need that when they need it. Right. And like, my most recent client I went to university with.
Oh, wow.
Right. You don't know who's going to create a business and when they're going to decide that you're the only person that they trust to do business with. You're creating brand experiences with people your entire life. And whether you're changing businesses or starting businesses or consulting or moving in and out around within an industry, which happens quite a bit too, right? You build trust as you go. Trust is gravity. And those people will travel with you, even if that guy was like Pluto, way out there. I haven't talked to him in a long time. And then all of a sudden he was like, whoop. And I'm like, yes, okay. We create the possibility of that happening at any given time. We create mechanisms so we can identify, right? Ooh, flashing lights. Someone came into Mercury orbit. We should talk to them about something. And we have the opportunities to do those things. We also have the opportunities to spend a lot of time being distracted by other numbers, the way other people are doing things, what other people are calling MQLs that will mostly be irrelevant for us. Yes. So I would say figure out what creates gravity for you and go in that direction and look at what in that direction could I authentically deem a qualified lead. And then maybe, just maybe, your MQLs will mean something to you. Jenn, because we have reached the end of this episode very, very fast, what are any last minute takeaways you would give to the peeps for today?
I guess I would say, don't focus too hard on, I'm straying into advice. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, we reached the part of this episode where we have explored, well, we haven't fully explored. We have explored many things. Yes. And this is their opportunity to, this is ways people can look at information. Yes. People can take it, they can ignore it. It's equally empowered for you folks to ignore all of the things we've said for the last 52 minutes.
Yes.
But go, Jen, go.
So my advice is to, when you're thinking about how you're tracking success and what does marketing success look like to you, to think about what is valuable as opposed to what is easy. MQLs are easy to track, but they are not always valuable. So identify that metric for your business that is the most valuable. And that is what success looks like for marketing. Then once you've made that decision on what that is, circulate it so everybody agrees on it. Make sure everybody's on the same page about what success looks like, but don't lean too much on what's easy and just focus more on what's valuable.
Oh, and I would also just because I think from an entrepreneurship perspective, people are, if you're a founder and you don't have another leadership members right now, you might say oh, yeah, good. Okay. But take that time, look at it from the different perspectives. What does this look like from marketing? What does this look like from sales? What does it look like from customer support? Could we support that many customers, right? Do we want to have that many? I had a really cool conversation with a client a few weeks back about well, we could have this, right? And we could set this up as this is what the free thing gives you, but can the technology handle that many free things? Right? Let's make sure it can do that before we promise to do it from a marketing perspective. And also, if we know that our ideal user is using this once a week, do we need to create a habit of people using it 7 times a week? Probably not. And so, and again, I think there's lots of parts of the process where people might have good clarity, and to take the time to just make sure all those dots are connected, whether that's within your own experience as an entrepreneur or within a bigger experience of diverse teams. Flow happens when we connect the dots. And MQL means nothing if it's not going somewhere, right? And MQL is not its final destination.
That's right.
Its goal is to go somewhere. So let's make sure it has somewhere to go, and that we've said oh, all of these people are going to Paris. Here's an airplane that takes you to Paris. Okay, great. Where do I buy my ticket?
Exactly.
Right? Okay, Jen, for those people who would love to stay in the conversation with you or learn more about what GrowGetter does in terms of helping people, not just with MQLs, with the entire marketing deliverables from a performance point of view, where is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah. So, you can connect with me individually on LinkedIn. You can follow GrowGetter. You'll see our weekly live streams there as well for Marketing Demystified podcast, or you can check out our website, growgetter.io, and get in touch with us there.
Yes, and I would highly recommend it, friends. Jen is great. I've connected with so many of the other team members too. They are also great. It's so helpful to have somebody who can just challenge your perspectives on these types of things, right? And as Jen mentioned at the beginning, we're not here to throw a bunch of stuff out the window, right? If you got something that works, good marketers are not going to come in and throw all of that away, right? They are curious about how to make it work better, more effectively, more efficiently, less budget, all of these different types of things. And if that's something that's helpful to you, get into a conversation with Jen, get into a conversation with me, get into a conversation. Quite honestly, anybody in the Authentic Marketing Fellowship, which are the people who have been on the show before, who get invited to the fellowship because they've been on the show and they gave awesome conversational opportunities. And so get in the conversation. If MQLs is something that's really top of mind for you right now, don't let this be the last time you participate in a conversation about it. Let it be the first of many times that you participate. And I know me and Jen could talk about this for a very long time. So if you want to talk to us about it, make sure you give yourself enough time to do that in a meaningful way. But other than that, connect with us, connect with each other, continue the conversation, because even what MQL means to you today might not be what MQL means to you forever. And it's an opportunity to build that innovation and iteration into your program from the foundation, so that it's easy to keep doing on an ongoing basis instead of doing crazy, stupid stuff. And with that, Jen, thank you again for sharing so much your insights today. To Swante and Ellen for being in the comments. It was great to see you both. And to everybody else, until next time, permission to do you. And now I will try to use my mouse that doesn't work very well, and we will sit here with smiles plastered on our face until it's done.